Many people find it a little unusual that a brain teacher would teach people how to forget. And yet, I believe it's very important that we are in control of what it is that we contemplate in our lives, what it is that occupies our attention. So, while a lot of emphasis has been placed on the various systems in the body, such as the digestive system, the reproductive system, and the central nervous system, the most important system that determines who you are and what you're capable of is your belief system. And it's quite likely that through a combination of life experiences and other people's insensitivity, your belief system in the area of learning, memory and brain power, it's quite possible that's taken a little bit of a beating. So, as an example, when I was a child at primary school, my teacher once asked me in class what 4 times 3 was. As I began to answer, she said, "Concentrate and look at me. The answer's not on the ceiling." Needless to say, I became flustered and gave the wrong answer, and for which I was promptly told that I was no good at maths. And who was I to argue? She was the expert. So through a combination of the snickering of the rest of the class and the fact that my teacher was the expert, I bought into the belief system, hook, line and sinker, that I was stupid at maths. And I was right. Now, interestingly, in a very important experiment, a teacher told her young class that all children with blue or light-coloured eyes are smarter than children with dark or brown eyes. Quite quickly, the performance in the classroom backed up her statement. A few weeks later, the teacher came into the classroom and apologised, as apparently she had made a mistake. "All babies are born with blue or light-coloured eyes," she said, "and as they grow up and become stronger and smarter, the eyes get darker." So just as quickly as before, the performance of the children reversed and was again determined by the colour of their eyes. The dark-eyed children became smart, and the light-eyed children began to fall behind. In a similar experiment, 2 different school classes were given an aptitude test to determine how smart they were. They were told that if they did well, they would be given a high locker number, while if they didn't do too well in this test, they'd be given a low locker number. In reality, this was really only done with one of the classes. In the other class, they reversed the rule and gave the slower or the dumber children a high locker number, while the naturally brighter children, the cleverer children, were actually given a lower locker number. And within a few months, regardless of how good the children were at their schoolwork based on their initial tests, their results were determined by their locker number. Now how's that for an amazing example of your belief system determining your reality? And you might think that you're all grown up now and that your belief system isn't so easily bruised as it once may have been. And yet, you'd be wrong. For example, forgetting the name of your boss as you introduce him or her to make a speech will bruise your belief system enough for you to begin to notice how many times you forget. And from then on, you may expect to forget, and then find that you do. When I first began teaching brain power skills, I often had people experience such terrific and rapid changes in their abilities that their belief systems simply couldn't adapt to their new reality. And as a result, the results were only short-lived. So think back to a powerful yet negative experience you've had in your life in the area of learning and memory and brain power. Now, I don't want you to use the 5-minute fear fix for perhaps traumatic situations in your life. I want you just to use the 5-minute fear fix for things to do with learning, memory and brain power. So, as an example, it might be a memory of getting a bad report card, maybe being told you're not very clever by a teacher, arguing over homework with parents, maybe being embarrassed in class in front of others, or any one of dozens of unpleasant experiences. As an example, the one I first started with was the memory of struggling through and failing a chemistry exam. So it could be any memory that you've got, a negative memory, that may be holding your belief system back about what you can start to achieve. Have you come up with a negative experience yet, a negative memory? Well, if you have, we'll now begin to lessen the influence that this experience may be having in your life right now. In a way, we will be doing some mental gardening. You see, if left untended over the years, your fertile imagination will have grown a large crop of mental weeds. Instead of fruit, instead of flowers, your imagination will grow mental weeds. So if, for example, you once received a really bad report card from school, you may believe either consciously or subconsciously that all future results will be like this. And as a result, always avoid situations in which there's a chance you may fail. And failure, by the way, is simply feedback. And if your mind often fails you, it simply reveals to you that you're going to benefit from the teachings from the brainteacher.com website. So let's get into the step-by-step process. This is how we're going to start to weed out negative memories to do with brain power, learning and recall, so you can start to change your belief system, and therefore the results you'll be getting from the Brain Teacher program will be much, much more permanent. So step 1 to weeding negative memories is to click the thumb and forefinger on your non-writing hand. So it's like doing the brain tune-up. So we're going to snap the thumb and finger on our non-writing hand, making sure that we leave our thumb and forefinger and our middle finger as well just lightly touching together. In a few moments, you will briefly be contemplating this negative learning experience, this negative brain power event you first thought of, in any way that feels appropriate. Now, step 2 is to increase the flow of blood to your neocortex by stimulating some neurovascular pressure points on your forehead. Neuro being the abbreviation for neurons, while vascular describes blood flow. So to do this, again, just simply cup your writing hand slightly and place it on your forehead and flatten your hand so the skin is being stretched very slightly. And as I said before, whenever you notice people attempting to remember something, they often subconsciously bring their hand up to their forehead to stimulate the flow of blood and oxygen to the brain anyway. So you can do this as part of step 2 to starting to weed out those negative memories. So your joined thumb and fingers will become a mental security blanket, which allows you to contemplate these thoughts without reinforcing them. So when you snap your thumb and finger and hold them together, that will help bring about the whole brain learning. It'll start to lower your brain frequencies, so you're not going to be reactivating those initial negative memories. You'll be able to simply observe them for what they are. Now, step 3 is now for about 30 seconds with your thumb and finger touching and your hand on your forehead. Simply close your eyes and begin to contemplate any sights, sounds or feelings that you associate with this particular negative memory to do with learning and brain power. Step 4 is to repeat the recall procedure again for about a minute, and yet this time I want you to contemplate fading out all of the colour from the memory, so it becomes a boring monochrome movie. Contemplate it again and fade it out so it becomes black and white. Fade it out, it becomes shades of grey. So step 5 is now to recall the same negative experience again in monochrome, in black and white, and lower down the volume, and then eventually turn off all the volume that you maybe previously have been associating with this negative memory. So now it's become a black and white, faded, quiet memory. And step 6, the last part of this dismantling process, is to feel yourself looking back on the experience and just walk away from the experience. And as you walk away from this silent, monochrome, distant memory, become aware of your footsteps, and the size of the memory becomes smaller and smaller and smaller as you simply walk away. Now that's a pretty unusual technique, and I'll summarize it again in a few moments. But it's possible your arm may have become a little tired, so just relax as I briefly explain what we just have been doing. You see, negative experiences are usually emotionalized and long-lasting because the emotion brings about all the neurochemicals to fire and create an engram that really permanently etches that memory, that negative experience into your brain. So negative experiences are emotionalized and long-lasting, so therefore my own personal tendency was to repeat those memories, to relive them, and therefore reinforce the negative experience with some regularity. And it's quite possible that you do the same thing. Now, in many people it may just reinforce as negative self-talk, or from other people they may relive the dream or just simply remember that bad time in their life. And so that reinforces events which may be completely meaningless events, but they can get repeated again and again. So as an example, I was, as you may know, a very nervous speaker, and the first time I had to read out aloud in school was a disaster. And as a result, from that moment on, I always tried to avoid public speaking. I dreaded it. And I would avoid speaking just in case I felt sick to the stomach again by experiencing the sight of people's faces, maybe about to burst into laughter. I carried that belief system around as excess baggage for years, until it dawned on me that the only way I was to become a success as a mind and brain power trainer was to become an entertaining and informative public speaker. So I went from having to rehearse buying a train ticket simply to go to and from school. I had to start to go from that experience of dreading speaking to anyone to becoming a public speaker on a stage talking to thousands of people. Quite a big leap. And so I can assure you that I have used these techniques on myself to go from where I was to where I am heading. Have you ever woken up from a nightmare to find your heart racing, your face flushed and sweaty and feeling really bad? Your body has been reacting physically to imagined experiences. You see, the mind often doesn't know the difference between an imagined experience and a real experience. So I went over the process of dismantling the memory of my poor performance as a public speaker, as you may have started to do before. I faded out the colour so the mocking faces didn't have any power anymore. The volume, I turned that down with the next screening of my memory so I wouldn't fear the sound of the laughter again. And then I contemplated walking away from the experience, being aware of the increasing feeling of satisfaction flowing through my feet as I mentally walked away from the experience. As I mentally walked away from the silent black and white memory of my speaking in front of my schoolmates, it also became smaller and smaller, and that helped put things back into proportion. All too often we tend to make a mountain out of a molehill and exaggerate the reality of the situation. The distancing technique will help you feel more in control and prevent yourself getting into a spiral of negative memories and negative self-talk. So, in a way, we're kind of like a mind director. We're a movie director when we're doing this. And we're not doing anything other than doing a specific technique to achieve our goal of becoming more confident about our mental abilities.